It's funny, the wisdom that's in the Bible, that sometimes we just overlook. We try and use our own logic or our own wisdom instead of using the wisdom of the Bible. What you're describing in the gospel reading is basically an intervention. If somebody in your family, let's say your brother, is drinking a little bit too much, and when they go to a party, they can't stop at one or two, and they start to get silly, and then they start to get obnoxious. Our job is not to look the other way or to go and grumble to all of our brothers and sisters. Look at what he's just making a mess, just embarrassing our whole family again. The objective is to go to the person and say, I need to talk to you about something. I love you, but you're doing something that's counterproductive. It's not good for you, and it's not good for anyone else around you. It doesn't have to be drinking. It could be maybe somebody's sense of humor just gets out of control, and it becomes all about them anytime you go to a party, and to say, some of your jokes are getting a little bit off color. When you go to the person in love and try to correct them, and they just ignore you, like, it's just you, what do you know? Then take one or two people with you and say, we agree, you've got to stop this. And if that doesn't work, you go to the church and maybe have the priest come and talk to them. How many times I've seen that sometimes a couple is arguing and they'll come to us and talk, and sometimes just having a third party there that keeps the volume from getting too high when they're discussing something. Sometimes that's all it takes to calm the waters. But when we see something that's wrong, just like it says in the first reading, you can't just sit by and just let it go. In the Old Testament time, and in the time that this reading from Ezekiel was done, the northern kingdoms had already been crushed. They had been decadent, and the southern kingdom was starting to get the same way, worshiping false gods and being decadent and letting the country go to waste. And there were a couple of people there that were trying to reason with them and saying, look, you can't do this. This is not right. And other people just stood by and said, isn't that a shame? And what God said was to the angels, go and find the people that are raising their voice against injustice and mark a tau on them. A tau is like a T, and isn't it curious that the T is kind of like a cross? To mark the sign of God on them, of godliness. And don't you touch them, the angels, when they go through to destroy. And God eventually used Babylonia to come in and be the instrument of his punishment instead of the angels. But the lesson for us today is that we're called to speak out against injustice, whether it's racism or whether it's violence and looting under the guise of protests, or whether it's unbridled capitalism where people are making billions of dollars and don't take care of the people that have nothing. We're called to speak out. And the scripture reading says something curious. It says, where two or three are gathered in my name, I'll be in their midst, and anything you pray for will be granted. The curious thing about that is, how long have we been praying to end abortion and it hasn't ended? Because God doesn't want us just to pray. Praying is incredibly important, but he also wants us to act. To go to people and say, this is wrong. To go to our legislators and say, this is wrong. And the really tragic thing is that in our society today, once a priest talks about anything that's right or wrong, they say, oh, that's political. Well, it's not political. It's right and wrong. I don't care what party you're talking about, what person you're talking about. We have 100-some years of Catholic social teaching that talks about everything from the dignity of the human person to the against slavery to the dignity of working, and all of these rich social teachings we're afraid to talk about. because we're afraid we'll offend someone. But we're called to stand up for what's right. And that scripture passage tells us if we don't, then we'll be judged one day, not just for what we've done, but for what we failed to do. When you see something that's just wrong, like I was driving in the downtown Pittsburgh last year, and all of a sudden the cops came and stopped the traffic, and these bicycles kept coming and going. And I looked, and they were in their underwear. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And I looked on the newspaper, and it said that, oh, it was the annual ride your bicycles in your underwear party. What is our world coming to? But did any of us call the mayor and say, this is wrong? I put up with the bike lanes, but this is just wrong. But as long as we sit back and don't say anything and just fold our arms and say, what a shame, then we're complicit in it. We're called not just to elect the right people in our world, but also to hold their feet to the fire. Once they're elected, whether it's the person we voted for or not voted for, we're called to watch what they do, the decisions they make in our name, and to call them up or write them or email them and let them know, I'm pleased with you or I'm not pleased with you. Our work doesn't end when we cast a vote and say, okay, I'm done. Oh, it didn't go the way I wanted it to. We're called to stand up for what's right, because if we don't stand up for what's right, we'll fall for anything.